Hey, fight fans, welcome to Puncher's Chance, episode 2. We got a lot of stuff to break down, a lot of exciting stuff that happened in the UFC, also in the PFL, and in the boxing world. But before we get started, make sure that you are following Puncher's Chance. We are on all social medias at Punch ETB. You can follow the Empty the Bench podcast on the Empty the Bench podcast network on Facebook, X, Instagram, and TikTok at ETB Network. Follow our YouTube channel as well at youtube.com/ETB Network for our show and all of our other ETB Network shows. If you can't watch Puncher's Chance, then take us on the road for you and put your AirPods in and listen to us.
Puncher's Chance is presented by Playback. Watching sports is more fun with others, but we spend too much of our time watching alone. Playback is a virtual space where communities can stream live sports together with everyone perfectly synced in. Creators can hop on stage, deliver their own play-by-play analysis and live commentary, and invite viewers for a Q&A. Playback makes watching sports fully interactive and a social experience. From playing fantasy sports, repping your favorite teams, and watching the commentators and communities you care about, win or lose, sports are best enjoyed together. Join our community by going to playback.tv/ETB Network to find out more, including our live stream schedule.
Yeah, and we have a lot to get into. So let's get right to the top, the biggest news, biggest fight of the weekend. We have Alex Pereira getting a KO win over Yuri Prochazka to retain the light heavyweight championship title of the world. Wow, what a great fight and what a performance by Alex. What were your thoughts and reactions to this, Brett?
Man, this was really one-sided, and some people thought that Yuri was going to come in here and put on a better performance than he did the first time around. This fight was very close on the betting line, as we discussed last week. Alex Pereira, a slight favorite going in on fight night. But this was one-sided. Big left hook at the end of the first round, knocked Yuri flat on his back. I thought the fight maybe was going to get stopped. But then if there was 3 more seconds on the clock, it surely would have with follow-up punches. But then in the second round, Yuri does not attempt a takedown. He didn't attempt to take down in the entire fight. He actually only landed 7 total strikes over the course of this fight. He was 7 for 25 total. It's a very wild style that it's very hard for him to consistently hit these guys. But when he does, he is creative and can get anybody out of there. But Alex landed 49 of 61 strikes he threw, which was good for 80% accuracy, which, that's tremendous. That's almost a shutout there. Like, Yuri's defense was just not, up to par really on Saturday. He was getting hit with almost everything Alex threw at him, damaged his legs in the first round. This was a masterful performance, in my opinion, by Alex Pereira, and he really separates himself from the rest of the division with this one.
Yeah, 100%. I think this is his best performance of his career by far. And like I said before, every time he steps into the octagon, he gets better and better. It seems like this match was over before it even started. Yuri Prochazka didn't have an answer for Alex Pereira. Alex Pereira was definitely hurting him with leg kicks, as we said. We always know that Yuri Prochazka is susceptible to leg kicks because he likes to lean forward. And also, he already has problems and have injuries in the past with his legs. So Alex Pereira took complete advantage of that. And then all he needed was to hit him once or twice, and that was it. Like you said, it could have ended if it would have just had maybe 5 seconds left in the first. It probably would have ended in the first round. But it went to the second, and wow, you see Alex knock people out with right hooks, but to see him knock someone out with a leg kick was pretty impressive. And he definitely pointed out in the game plan that was definitely a strategy to go for that head leg kick, and it was definitely masterful. And, I think, with the coaching that he gets from Glover Teixeira, I think that's definitely showing as well. People talk all the time about how Alex Pereira has no ground game, but yet everybody he fights never seems to be able to take him to the ground. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see where he goes from here. But I'm definitely disappointed in Yuri Prochazka, and he's definitely going to have to reevaluate himself. And I'm not sure if he's going to be able to climb that ladder once again.
And one of the things that you could tell was Yuri was disappointed with himself a little bit too. He put a comment out on Instagram after the fight that he's going to have to evolve as a fighter that next level, or he needs to give up fighting. I think that was a little dramatic, but for someone who wants to be world champion and expects that level of perfection from themselves as Yuri does, That's kind of the cost of these losses to him mentally. So I think Yuri will bounce back. I think that he competes well with the rest of the division, but he did not fight a smart fight in this one. I thought that he really fought at Alex Pereira's game. And, I've been talking about this for a little bit. Alex Pereira has not fought a grappler yet in his career. There are 2 fighters who have landed takedowns on him. Andreas Michailidis in his debut landed one in the first round, but then was, sequentially knocked out by a flying knee. And then Jan Blachowicz was able to land a takedown in their fight. That was a close fight. A lot of people are calling for Pereira to move up to heavyweight here. I think that he really has to beat Magomed Ankalaev before he moves up. Ankalaev has kind of been shunned by the promotion a little bit after his comments following the draw to Jan Blachowicz. And I think that he's really due for a title opportunity here. He even came out and mentioned on Twitter that he thinks he could beat Alex Pereira standing up. That is just insane to me. For a guy who was a Hall of Famer in gory kickboxing, a 2-weight world champion, how many of these guys are consistently going to go in and fight him at his own game? That's like going in and saying you're going to wrestle Bo Nickel, or I'm going to go in and submit Damian Maia. It just doesn't happen. And for someone to go beat a guy like Alex at his own game, you have to be an elite striker like Israel Adesanya is, or someone on that level. I'd like to see some takedowns implemented with these guys that are fighting against him. I thought Jamal Hill should have gone for a takedown. And maybe Yuri Prochazka. I thought that maybe if they suck the energy out of him early against the cage, maybe those punches don't have the same effect later in the fight. But I guess we'll never really know with the style that these guys are kind of approaching the fights with Pereira. I just wish someone would kind of try and test the other elements of his game.
Yeah, you would think the way to beat Alex would have to take it to the ground. It does seem like he does. There has been a few times where I think fighters have tried to attempt to take him down. None of them have been tremendous grapplers, but some have tried. And, I think Alex has done a great job with takedown defense. But as you stated before, Ankalaev's got to be the next up. They keep talking about him moving up, but Ankalaev is the only one that's ranked up there in the top 5 that he really hasn't beaten yet. Ankalaev is definitely stylistically probably the toughest matchup for Alex Pereira. He's definitely probably maybe the best grappler in all of the light heavyweight division. Many people believe that he's been the future champion for a long time. It's just a matter of when, not if. So it's definitely going to be interesting. It seems like a lot of people believe he deserved the matchup instead of Yuri. Instead of Yuri getting the rematch, Ankalaev probably should have got that matchup. I'm not sure if the UFC doesn't want to give it to him because he's not a household name. He's not an exciting fighter by any means. But I think at the end of the year, we may see Ankalaev versus Alex Pereira. And I think if Alex Pereira can get past Ankalaev, then I think most certainly, at that point, you could say he cleared the division. And I think at that point, we could see him move up to heavyweight and challenge to become the first ever 3-division champion. Now, we've never seen anybody in UFC do it. With Alex Pereira being such a weight cut on Phenom, being able to get down to 185, which I still don't understand how he did that. Yeah. He looks like he can fight at heavyweight. And, if he did decide to make that move and go up to heavyweight and compete with the bigger guys, how do you think he compete with those guys, Brett?
I think against some of them, I think he'd compete well, but it's so logged up at the top right now with, the UFC continuously trying to push this Stipe versus John Jones fight that, and nobody really, is calling for other than the promotion. We all want to see John Jones fight the winner of Aspinall and now insert Curtis Blades. If the UFC maybe waited a month or two, they could have slid Alex Pereira into that slot that Curtis Blades was in, but Blades picked up a nice win and obviously inserts himself into the conversation. But I think there are guys like Alexander Volkov that Alex Pereira would match up against well. Volkov obviously coming off that impressive win over Pavlovich. He's a technical kickboxer. If he tries and stands with Pereira, I think Pereira might have a little bit more power than him, but Volkov is a big man. And when we listened to Dana White at the press conference this last week, he kind of explained that these guys at heavyweight, they've been hit by middleweights before. They've been hit by light heavyweights before. Now, maybe there's not been light heavyweights and middleweights who hit quite as hard as Alex Pereira, and that could be the case. But, largely, I think that he's going to struggle with the bigger heavyweights like Pavlovich and Aspinall, and especially people with ground games and size on him. But I do want to kind of get your opinion on one thing before we move off of the Yuri Prochazka Pereira fight. Leading in, we didn't really get to talk about it because we were recording midweek, but Prochazka was talking about voodoo and magic and Pereira calling upon spirits to guide him into fight week. That was really alarming to me going into the event. I thought that showed a lack of confidence from Yuri that I really hadn't seen before. He seemed kind of spooked, for lack of a better word, that Pereira would, is using some type of spiritual force against him. What do you think of that?
Yeah, I was definitely pretty shocked to hear that. We know Yuri Prochazka is definitely a different human being. He definitely thinks differently than the average human being. So coming from him, it's not so surprising. But it definitely goes to show, where his mindset is in that fight. That does he think that, Alex is so superior that he thinks it involves, supernatural beings to, get past him? Maybe that is how he feels. I mean, when you're a guy like Yuri Prochazka, and every single guy you stepped in that octagon with, you were the better man. You step in there twice with Alex, and it seems like you can't even touch him. So, it's definitely messed with his confidence. I definitely think that's probably where that stemmed from. But definitely when we talk about Alex at heavyweight, we definitely are going to get the Stipe Miocic and John Jones fight. Obviously, we have Aspinall and Blades. I don't think John Jones is going to fight 3 more fights. I think he's got 2 at most. So I think what would probably happen is I think John Jones goes out there, has easy work with Stipe. I do think Tom Aspinall probably gets past Curtis Blades. And then maybe at the end of the year, we have Alex defend the title one more time at light heavyweight against Ankalaev. He gets past Ankalaev. Why not have a super heavyweight super fight with Tom Aspinall versus Alex? And then winner of that gets the ultimate prize against John Jones. And that could be the ultimate fight for John Jones to go out in. And I would be happy if that was the route the UFC decided to go in.
Yeah, I think a lot of fight fans would be happy with that. But at the same time, that's asking, a lot out of Tom Aspinall to defend that interim title twice. I don't know if he'd agree to that. Certainly, I don't think an interim title has been defended twice in the UFC. I know Tony Ferguson once defended at lightweight, but against Justin Gaethje. But defending it twice is asking a lot of a guy, and it really comes back to John Jones, because Tom Aspinall wouldn't have to be put into this situation to defend the title, an interim title twice, unless he was active. And I know John got hurt, and you can't rag on somebody for tearing their pec. But at the same time, his inactivity over the last 3 years has really, been detrimental to the rest of the heavyweight division.
So in your honest opinion, you would like to just have, Aspinall versus John Jones later this year, kind of skip Stipe, and then so he only has to defend the interim belt one time?
Yeah, exactly. I think the UFC needs to throw a rain check on that fight. Maybe go check and see, where Stipe is, in his career mentally and stuff. You saw Dana White kind of talk about John Jones at the press conference after the fight. Him and Kevin Iole got into it a little bit. He was defending John Jones, saying that he's the best fighter ever, the pound for pound #1, and all this stuff. And I completely agree with him. But at the same time, you can't take away valuable years of Tom Aspinall's career, making him defend interim titles over and over again in rematches with people like Curtis Blades, which obviously he wants to get that fight back. But if he wins that fight, I really don't think they should ask him to defend the belt once again. So maybe John Jones goes and fights Tom Aspinall, and then the winner of that fights Alex Pereira or something like that. But I certainly want to see Alex Pereira fight Magomed Ankalaev in his next fight.
Yeah, 100%. And my last question for you, Brett, before we move on, just in case that they did match up, if we did see Alex versus Aspinall or Jones, do you think Alex has a shot against those guys, or do you think both those guys would probably beat Alex?
Man, that's a tough question. And, I think both of the guys that we're talking about, John Jones and Tom Aspinall, two of their biggest weapons are their minds. These are not guys that are going to go in there and try and kickbox the kickboxing world champion. John Jones, we saw in his fight with Ciryl Gane. Ciryl Gane is a Muay Thai world champion, a very decorated striker, outstruck Francis Ngannou at times. John Jones made him looked like a child. He went in there and, he took him down. He got a front choke against the cage that, you don't really see that choke often in high-level mixed martial arts. Cyril Gane had his butt on the ground. You didn't know how to scoot away from the choke. He really made it look easy. And I think that there'd be a similar situation if Alex Pereira fought John Jones. But if he fought Tom Aspinall, it'd be very interesting. We saw Aspinall hang out on the feet against Sergey Pavlovich and eventually get it done. It would kind of, determine whether Aspinall took the fight to the ground or not. I think Aspinall would be a much heavier opponent, someone who could control Pereira on the ground. And we'll see. I think the Magomed Ankalaev fight will answer a lot of questions on Alex's takedown defense.
Yeah, 100%. Wherever Alex does decide to fight next, I think it's going to be his hardest fight to date. And honestly, I would never pick against Alex, but I think against Ankalaev, Aspinall, or John Jones, I may be on the other side of going against Alex Pereira.
I probably would too.
And now we move on to our co-main event. Something that we never ever see ever in UFC. Kind of a 5 minutes before the fight change, last minute withdrawal. We had Diego Lopez going up against Danny Yang. This fight switched multiple times. He was supposed to go up against Brian Ortega, but Brian Ortega got an illness and have to withdraw. And Danny Yang was able to step in, be a company man, and be able to come in on as short notice as you possibly could get. For it being such a short notice fight, I thought Dan Yang and Diego Lopez fought a great fight. I thought both of them were competitive without having much of a training camp. What did you think of this fight?
Yeah, I mean, Ige showed tremendous courage coming in here and taking on the best finisher in this division. Diego Lopez has over 20 finishes in his career, and Dan Ige stepped in after I heard that he got called while at a massage parlor. He was getting a massage earlier in the day, just relaxing on a Saturday afternoon, probably about to go home and watch the fights, or maybe even go to the event. And then gets a call that Brian Ortega is sick, and we need a featherweight to come in here and take on this guy that's taking everybody out of there in a round or 2 rounds. So Dan Ige really solidified himself as one of the toughest fighters on the roster and somebody that you can really rely on with the company. I think the company will do him a favor and put him on that sphere card that both of these guys asked to be on. As far as Lopez is concerned, he was one of the brightest contenders in this division coming in, and I don't think that this fight takes anything away from his stock. Some people were talking about him potentially gassing in the 3rd round. Now, I understand what they're saying, but you have to take into account how many mental obstacles Diego Lopez had to overcome leading into this fight. First, a change of an opponent, first a weight miss by Ortega that made the fight at 155 pounds instead of 145 pounds, then a change of opponent plus an additional 10-pound allowance for Dan Ige. This is a guy in Diego Lopez who went through a full training camp, went through all the road work, the hard sparring to get in there in a featherweight title eliminator. And and he finds himself in a 165-pound catchweight fight, drinking as much water and eating as much as he can to try and gain weight to make it kind of fair as Ige enters at his natural weight. So I thought it was kind of a wild west fight. We saw this back in the day with Pride a little bit. People would fight on the same night against bigger opponents or opponents up a weight class. But it was really a throwback to the original days of mixed martial arts. And I thought that it was a testament to the UFC for them being able to, make chicken salad out of, chicken, what. So Dana White and company, they can, really pull things together. And I'm glad that this card at least saved Diego Lopez's spot in the co-main event.
Yeah, it definitely shows that no matter what adversity the UFC, faces when it comes to these cards and late notices, Dana White and Hunter always seem to, deliver. And you definitely, I don't see any way any fan could come away thinking any differently or anything negative about either of these fighters. Both these fighters basically went in there and just had a fight. They weren't able to really have a clear-cut, weight class at the fight. They weren't able to, game plan for it. So basically it was just go in there and just fight, and whatever happens, happens. I think, Ige showed, veteran, toughness and experience in that 3rd round. I think that's why he fared so well. He is a great fighter, and I think that 3rd round showed why he is one of the top 15 in the world. And I think also, I think Diego Lopez is a future title contender as well. So I think both these guys' stocks to go up. I think Dana White should give both these guys what they want for being company men. They should both be put on the UFC card in the Sphere in September. And honestly, I think they should rebook the Diego Lopez and Brian Ortega fight. I think everybody would love to see it. I think it would be a great fight for the featherweight division, and I think it would be a great fight for the Sphere.
Yeah, and Ortega's going to have to take a serious look at what he wants to do with his career. You were talking a lot before this fight about how Ortega's planned to move up in weight regardless of outcome. And, looking back, that was a bigger story than what we thought, because he goes in and misses weight, and then doesn't even come up into the fight. It was reported that it was a cold or he had some type of sickness, maybe food poisoning, who knows. But this is International Fight Week. You're in a title eliminator, a co-main event matchup against somebody that everybody fears. You can't pull out of that fight unless, there's grave circumstances. And, I don't know if he doesn't have really the dog in him anymore to compete at that top level. I don't think he was intimidated by Diego Lopez. I'm sure he had some type of ailment that kept him out of the fight. But, at the same time, Dan Ige is a legend for taking this fight. As far as the fight is concerned, we'll break down a little bit that way. Lopez really controlled this one on the ground. He couldn't find the submission, had the back control of Ige in the first and third round, which, ultimately granted him the victory. But he outstruck him on the feet as well, landed 90 total strikes, 49 significant. His leg kicks looked good. He had sharp, crisp punches on the feet. Ige was loading up for big right hands. He has one-punch power. He reminds me a little bit of a Josh Emmett. They kind of have similar styles, the anti-wrestling, try and sprawl and brawl, land big shots on the feet. But Ige couldn't really land a home for that big right hand. He was looking for it early. But Diego Lopez was showing how well-rounded he was. And I thought, we talked about it a little bit about the gassing in the third round. But, I think that's a little bit overblown.
Yeah, and it's definitely going to be interesting to see what Ortega decides to do. I really don't think moving up to 155 is going to help him whatsoever get closer to a title shot, because there's plenty of contenders right now at 155 as well. But maybe he's getting to the age, we talk about it all the time, that as you get older, fighters can't cut weight certain much. And that's why, as they get older, fighters tend to move up weight classes. And maybe we're getting to the point where Brian Ortega can't make 145 anymore. And it's unfortunate because he's coming off of a great win against Yair Rodriguez. And I think, him and Diego Lopez, I think that could be a fight that could put one of them in a number one contenders match in 2025. So it's definitely going to be interesting. It's going to all depend on, what Ortega wants to do and ultimately what him and his body can do. So it's going to be interesting to see. But I do think some way or another, Diego Lopez and Ige will be on that card in the Sphere.
Yeah, I think they should be. And, hopefully Diego Lopez gets a top 5 matchup out of this one.
Yeah, 100%. I wouldn't even be mad if they gave Ivanov Mozar. That was a great fight even on short notice. Everybody would love to see that rematch. So there's plenty of other options out there. You got Aljamain Sterling as well. So there'll be plenty of other options for the UFC. But, obviously, this brings us to our next fight. We had Roman Dolidze moving up to light heavyweight and beating Anthony Smith. This was a fight that I definitely didn't see it going this way. What was your reaction to this fight, Brett?
Man, the top 2 fights on this card I thought were pretty good, especially for it being on short notice in the co-main event. Alex Pereira gets it done in the main event, but the rest of this card, Anthony, I got to tell you, Peyton Talbot and Joe Pyfer obviously shined, but that fight with Martin Boutier and Arlovsky was painful, and this one wasn't far behind it, man. We were originally, given Carlos Olberg and Jamal Hill, that was supposed to be the fight here. That was a fight everybody was really anticipating, and then we end up getting a guy who's making his 205 debut, didn't look in the greatest shape that we've seen him in. And, Anthony Smith, a former title challenger, who also didn't look in that greatest shape. So I didn't like this fight really at all. I thought it was boring. I was watching it with friends, and people's attention seemed to be waning during this fight, and, people were on their phone and that sort of thing. It's tough for me because Anthony Smith, I've been watching him his whole career. He just had a big win versus Vitor Petrino. Some people were actually picking him to win this fight against Roman Dolidze. I was on the side of Dolidze, but I was certainly listening to the opinions of some very smart people say that Anthony Smith was going to win this fight. So, I don't know what's next for him in his career. Maybe he continues to fight these contenders and stuff, but it was not the greatest performance from him. And in victory, I don't think it was the greatest performance from Roman Dolidze either, even though he did land over 100 total strikes and showed some good spots on the ground.
Yeah, it looks like right now Anthony Smith, at his point of his career, he can't compete with the top 10 guys. Whenever he gets one of those top 10 guys, it doesn't end well. It didn't look good when he fought Johnny Walker. Obviously, he didn't look good against Khalil Roundtree. And now we've seen Roman Dolidze move up, and he doesn't look good again. So I'm not sure what Anthony Smith does. He's definitely going to have to fight someone lower in the rankings again, just like he did with Victor Petrino last fight. He's going to have to fight someone like that next. But what about Roman Dolidze, though? I know it wasn't a exciting fight, and it's definitely not something that Dana White's going to be too impressed about. But you got to give him his credit. At this point, he's a top 10 middleweight. And he's a top 10 light heavyweight. Even for, as bad as he looked in his recent fights, he's definitely, he went out there and won the fight. It's going to be interesting who he fights. I think because he beat Anthony Smith, I think it's more likelier than not that he stays at light heavyweight instead of moving back to middleweight. It'll be interesting to see who they match him up against if he does decide to stay in the light heavyweight. He's going to be probably ranked 10th in the division. So are they going to get someone ranked in the top 10 or someone outside the top 10? I wouldn't mind them giving him maybe Carlos Ulberg. I think that would be an interesting fight since he beat Anthony Smith and let Dolidze and Ulberg fight. Or if you really want to test Dolidze, put Dolidze against Ozdemir. And let's see how that goes, and let's see if he doesn't end up like Johnny Walker.
Yeah, I think Ozdemir's a great matchup. I think Ulberg is kind of after knocking out Mennefield, maybe Ulberg does fight Jamal Hill or somebody ranked a little higher. A lot of people are high on Ulberg right now, but I like the Ozdemir fight. Roman Dolidze, I don't have the schedule up in front of me, but the name that really popped out to me when you were posing this question, what about Nikita Krylov? Krylov is a guy that is very well rounded. We saw him kind of dominate Paul Craig until he got caught in a triangle. He would have probably had a title eliminator opportunity if it wasn't for that loss. Krylov is a southpaw, has good takedown defense. I think that's the fight I'd like to see with Roman Dolidze. But, are my hopes super high for Dolidze in the 205-pound division making a title run? No, not really.
Yeah, I think this is probably the best it's going to be. I think he's probably going to lose his next matchup, especially if they give him someone inside the top 10. Because I think right now every fighter knows that Anthony Smith is not a legit top 10 light heavyweight in the world anymore.
Yeah, unfortunately. At one point he was a great title challenger and shows heart every time out there. And he can even upset some of these guys like we were talking about with Vitor Petrino. But night in, night out, it doesn't seem like he has the same gas in the tank. I agree.
Yeah. And I know his best friend, Chael Sonnen, has been vouching for him on YouTube, saying he wants him to fight Alex Pereira for the light heavyweight championship. But I don't see that ever coming to fruition after this fight.
Yeah, I think that kind of got silenced.
We have another fight that we thought, could go either way. And it seemed like it was on more of the side of not being so exciting. We have Ian Machado Gary defeated Michael Venom Page by unanimous decision. This was definitely a interesting fight. Definitely not how a lot of people saw it going. Ian Machado Gary realized that Michael Venom Page was too fast for him and that he couldn't stay on the feet with him. And it's interesting for, Ian Gary being the striker and the kickboxer that he is, that, he was definitely outmatched on the feet. But honestly, I could be equally as impressed by him because he had the IQ and the fight IQ to take it to the ground and show a little bit of ground game and kind of show that maybe he's not a one-dimensional fighter and that, if he does get in trouble on the ground or on the feet, he could take it to the ground, he could take it to the feet, wherever he needs to do to get the win. So honestly, I'm probably more impressed, because now I think he's more than a one-dimensional fighter. But what were your thoughts from this fight, Brett?
Yeah, I thought you hit it on the head there, Anthony. The fight IQ of Ian Gary was really what stuck out to me. They were talking about how he went and trained with Damian Maia, the jiu-jitsu world champion, in this one before, because he wanted to make sure his grappling and ground game was sound and tightened up in case he had to use it in this one against Michael Venom Page. And that really shows me he can put his ego to the side and say, hey, all right, if Venom Page gets me on the feet, what's my backup plan, and am I prepared for the backup plan? And he was. And he tested Venom Page early. He found out that Venom Page was a little faster than him. Michael did a good job of cutting distance. He's got a crazy style on the feet that not a lot of people are going to be able to figure out. The matchup for Michael Venom Page for me is Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. I think that's the one everybody wants to see with him left in his career. But he's in a bad spot now for losing to Ian Gary. He was just inside the top 15 rankings, and now he's probably outside the top 15 rankings. Dana White had this fight scored a draw. I thought that it was really competitive. I had it 2-1 for Ian Gary, and so did the judges. I thought the takedowns and the control on the back in the third round really won him the fight. And as you were saying, it was the fight IQ of him really going down to Brazil and training with Damian Maia and getting that grappling experience before this contest that really, impressed me the most.
Yeah, I gave Ian Gary the 2-1 win as well. I thought he won that third round. But Michael Venom Page definitely had his moments, and he definitely had Ian Gary in some danger. I don't think Michael Venom Page should be taken out of the rankings. He definitely lost to some guy that was ranked higher than him. So I don't think it'd be fair to take him out of the rankings for losing a guy who's ranked in the top 7. But definitely, it's going to be interesting where they go with him. The matchup, like you said, has got to be with Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. They shoot to see who really is the ultimate kickboxing, karate fighter in the UFC. But for Ian Gary, it's going to be interesting to see. He really, really wants that Colby Covington fight. But as Colby Covington always said, he only fights in main events, and he only fights in high market fights. And right now, Ian Gary's fights, even though he's winning, haven't been the most exciting fights. And Ian Gary has improved. Can he sell tickets or maybe be a main event on the card? And I think that maybe be what's holding back the him and Colby Covington fight. He did obviously call out Shavkat Rakhmonov. I don't think that would be a good idea for Ian Machado Gary. I think he should wait a year or two in that because I don't think anybody's beating Rakhmonov right now. So I don't like that call out for him. But if he can somehow convince Colby Covington to fight, I think that's the fight to make for Ian Gary as him and Colby Covington.
Yeah, I like that fight a lot. It would certainly boost the star recognition of Ian Gary, getting him a big name to beat. I don't like really how Covington looked in that Leon Edwards fight. I know he was coming back off a long layoff, but the takedown attempts didn't look like the timing was there against Leon Edwards. I thought Colby Covington should have hung it up after that fight. I know we talked about it a little bit, but when that fight first occurred, but Colby's going to need a win here at some point, or he's going to have to quit. And maybe his last fight would be against a guy like Ian Gary, a little bit of a passing of the torch, passing of the guard matchup. I'd like that one as well. For MVP, I think that Stephen Wonderboy Thompson is the fight to make. That's something you could put as a main event on a fight night card, certainly. But for Machado Gary, really, as I'm looking at the welterweight rankings, I think he matches up well against almost everyone outside Shavkat Rakhmonov. Now, Rakhmonov is the dark horse in this division, has finished every single fight he's ever been a part of, is absolutely impressive standing and grappling. So he's kind of a matchup nightmare for Gary. But outside of that, I think Ian Gary is going to be a future title challenger and someone that you can really put your stock into.
Yeah, 100%. I've always been super high on Ian Gary. I think he's got high potential, and I think he's proved it, particularly in this fight. He's obviously shown that, the training and the practice with the grappling is definitely improved. And like you said, maybe everybody outside of Shavkat, he could probably give every one of those guys a fight. So it's going to be interesting to see where that division goes. Obviously, right now, if we were able to get what we'd want, we'd have, Jack Dilemma going up against Shavkat in number 1 contenders match. But right now, Jack Dilemma is dealing with an injury. So Ian Gary's out there for Shavkat. I really don't want Ian Gary to get that fight right now. I would like to see him fight maybe one fight. But, hey, if that's the only guy for Shavkat and that's the only guy for Ian Gary, they may not have a choice but to have those two guys match up against each other.
Yeah, and that would be a great fight. I think that you could potentially get the next number 1 contender out of that fight as well. They might have to wait a while, but both of those guys, I mean, I don't know if they're going to want to kill 2 stars in one fight, potential superstars. Both of these guys, if they fought for a title, that's a fight that sells over 500,000 pay-per-views, especially with the UFC promotional machine behind it in maybe a year or 2 from now. I like that fight a lot, and I think that would be a big one if it was for a title. So maybe they don't want to kill that opportunity a little too early, but Ian Gary needs a big name opponent next. And if it's not Colby Covington, Shavkat Rakhmonov for a chance at the title would probably be as good as it gets.
Yeah. And obviously, like you said, there was a couple, lackluster performances and fights on this card, but we did have a couple fighters that maybe saved it. One of them being Joey Body Bags Pfeiffer, bouncing back, proving that, he's definitely maybe one of the top 15 best guys in the world. And Joe Pfeiffer went on there and got back on track with a vicious KO win over Marc-Andre Alveleu. He proved that he still got that KO power. I know he didn't look too good against Jack Hermansson, but Jack Hermansson's one of probably the 10 best in the world. And it was a 5-round fight. Had that been a 3-round fight, I think Joe Pfeiffer maybe fared a little bit better. Maybe he could have squeaked out a 2-1 win. But anyways, he was able to get back. He was able to prove that he may be one of the best upcoming prospects in the division. He called out Paul Craig. I think that would be a perfect matchup for him because it's a guy who's, just outside the rankings. And I think that's a perfect test for Joe Pfeiffer. But what did you think about Joe Pfeiffer's bounce-back performance, Brett?
Man, this kid is good. He has massive potential. This kid, Joe Pfeiffer, has power in his hands. He's able to get the submissions on the ground at time. We saw him submit Abdul, what's his name? Abdul Ral Hassan. He's got the African guy with 3 names, Abdul Raik Al Hassan, I believe is his name. But yeah, he got the submission over him. Joe Pfeiffer, went up and fought Jack Hermansson, like you were saying, but Jack Hermansson has turned back plenty of contenders in the past, submitted Kelvin Gastelum. We saw Chris Curtis make a push here a couple years ago, and the guy that he stumbled against eventually was Jack Hermansson in that card in England. And I like what you said there about Joe Pfeiffer probably winning that fight in a 3-round fight, 2-1. I agree with that. And when you go back and watch that Hermansson fight, he faded late. And Jack Hermansson is one of these guys who's very tricky, very elusive on the feet while being a grappler. I think, he's very well-rounded, and he has one of the best cardio in the entire 185-pound division. So Jack Hermansson is not a bad contender to lose to in the UFC. And I think that was a wealth of experience that night that Joe Pfeiffer is going to take on here on his next title push. Now, as far as this one was concerned, Andre Barrio couldn't get anything going in this one. This was all Joe Pfeiffer. Backed him to the cage, big right hand behind the head. It looked like it didn't even land cleanly, but when you go back and watch the replay, it just hit him in behind the ear, perfect spot, sat him down, huge ground and pound after that. Joe Pfeiffer is a finisher, man. And I know some people are calling for Paul Craig. He called for Paul Craig. I don't like that matchup. Paul Craig is a guy that struggles against people who he can't take down. Joe Pfeiffer is too strong for him to take down. Joe Pfeiffer ends that by knockout just as viciously as he did last weekend. I think Joe Pfeiffer needs to call Jack Hermansson back out for a rematch or potentially Bo Nickel. Bo Nickel is a guy who is very green. We saw him against Cody Brundage, and you're going to want to get this guy early. I thought that Joe Pfeiffer maybe missed an opportunity to call out Bo Nickel in a fight that would really pit the 2 biggest up-and-coming prospects from that division in America against one another. Looking at history, these are fights that do get made. You look at Don Fry, Ken Shamrock, the 2 best guys coming from America at that time. They had to fight each other. These guys are going to have to fight each other at some point, and it's sooner rather than later. But I like the stylistic matchup. I know we were texting a little bit off air about it. It's the big KO power of Pfeiffer versus the world-class grappling of Bo Nickel. That's what we've been tuning in for since UFC 1. That's the matchup to me.
Yeah, it will definitely be very, very exciting. Like you said, the classic striker versus grappler. The only thing is, like you said before, when we mentioned Ian Gary and Shavkat, with Joe Pfeiffer and Bo Nickel, putting those 2 guys against each other, does the UFC want to kill the 2 birds with 1 stone? Like you said, maybe they could eventually match up in a potential title eliminator when they're both ranked highly up there in the rankings. But I do understand where you're coming from. Paul Craig, is definitely not a high marketable name. It doesn't get, Joe Pfeiffer in the rankings. So it'd be nice to maybe see maybe against a Chris Curtis. I do want to see him get a guy with a ranked number because I do want to see Joe Pfeiffer with a ranked number after his next win. But back on how he looked again that performance against Marc-Andre, what stood out to me is he showed patience. He showed that he wasn't going to gas out early. He looked at like he improved and that he made the adjustments from his last fight. He was patient. He didn't empty out the gas tank too early, and when it was time to deliver, he did. And I was very impressed by him. And I don't ever want to compare anybody to Alex Pereira, but Joe Pfeiffer, like a Alex Pereira or like a Francis Ngannou, he's just got this once in a generational power to where he just barely has to touch you, and that's all it takes. Whenever you have a guy like that in any matchup, he's going to have a chance to win. And I'm definitely want to see him fight a ranked opponent. I think the sky's the limit for Joe Pfeiffer in UFC.
Yeah, he's a physical athlete, man. He certainly looks huge in there for the 185-pound division, and that power is legit. I agree there. I think that his athleticism and physicality is actually underrated. Some people aren't really looking at that. He's a big body at 185 pounds, and he's going to have a size advantage on a lot of these guys. Even the grapplers in this division, I think are going to have a hard time taking him to the ground just based on his fierce size and, how he's put together physically.
Yeah, 100%. He's got to be one of the biggest middleweights in the world. He's got to be rated up there with Dricus Du Plessis as one of these really, really big middleweights. He's basically a light heavyweight that weight cuts to middleweight.
He looked bigger in there, in my opinion, than Roman Dolidze did at 205 pounds. He looked bigger at 185 than Roman Dolidze did. And he might have been 200 plus come fight night, Joe.
Yeah, 100%. He may have been walking in there at about, 210, 215. We've seen these guys, when Alex was fighting at 185, he was walking in at octagon at about 215. So we see these guys doing same 30-pound weight cuts. And Joe Pfeiffer's definitely got to be one of the biggest weight cuts, but he uses it to his advantage. And with that KO power in that weight class, it's going to be really, really tough for a guy to beat him. And if you're a striker, good luck trying to beat him on the feet.
Yeah.
We also have another guy who's probably one of the top upcoming prospects in UFC. I think he also saved the card. We had Peyton Talbot having another impressive win, getting a KO victory. What were your thoughts and what were your reactions to this very, very quick fight?
Peyton Talbot was a 22-1 favorite, but he might as well have been an 100-1 favorite. This one was not close. Gamamori was, nowhere near, any type of success in this one. Peyton Talbot just went in there with confidence, sat him down with a big right hand. No follow-up needed, really. It was one of those walk-off KOs. Peyton Talbot has one-punch power, and he really jumped on the scene when we saw him defeat Cameron Simon. And Simon is a guy who was well-respected. We really liked what he brought to the table and his skills. Simon, we thought, was one of the most well-rounded prospects in all of the division, and Talbot really got through him with relative ease as well. So this kid is young. This kid is good. He's got full of confidence. This is really what us fight fans watch for. We love seeing these young, talented, confident guys like John Jones when he's coming up, like Ilya Topuria, Max Holloway. You can just see that, with their confidence and skill level, this guy's destined for greatness. And I think that that's the case for Peyton Talbot as well in this division.
Yeah, I know he's very young, doesn't have a lot of fights under his belt, but I wouldn't be upset if they decide to give him a ranked opponent soon. This guy has proved that he's worthy, and he's definitely got the skill level right now to compete with the top of the division. He did call out Adrian Yanez, a guy who's just outside the top 15. I think that would be a perfect matchup for him. Give him a guy just outside the top 15, see how he fares with that guy, and if he could pass that test, and then I think we can see Peyton Talbot fighting against the ranked opponent next. But what do you think about that matchup and his call out of Adrian Yanez?
I like that one a lot. Two strikers. Yanez is a boxer. We saw him kind of get turned back by Rob Font, but maybe, I know he just picked up a win. So yeah, I like that matchup a lot. Yeah.
And do you think at this point, do you think he is a fight away from a ranked opponent? If it was up to you, how many fights would you like to see Peyton Talbot fight before he gets tested against a top 15 opponent?
I think if he did get through Adrian Yanez, I think he probably deserves a top 15 ranking, whether that's 14, 15. But I think he's one win away from a ranked opponent.
Yeah, I honestly agree too. And, we could probably say the same about for our next fighter. We have Vicinius Oliveira, who had an impressive win over Ricky Simone. Ricky Simone, who's a guy who, probably is right there outside the top 15. I thought Vicinius Oliveira looked great in this fight. He definitely at this point has to get a ranked opponent. He's huge for the bantamweight division. He's definitely like Aljamain Sterling when he was at bantamweight. I think Vicinius Oliveira is probably walking around at about 170, 175. But he's a tremendous striker. I think he's got an all-around game to him. I love his unique striking ability. We've seen, his highlight KOs. He did call out Umar Nurmagomedov. That's a little too much too soon. He's not going to get that opponent. But honestly, I would like to see him get a guy like Jonathan Martinez. Jonathan Martinez looked like a guy that was on a high trajectory, then lost to Jose Aldo. So he's kind of in an iffy spot as well. I would love to see Vicinius Oliveira going up against Jonathan Martinez.
Yeah, I think that's a great matchup. I couldn't have come up with one better myself. Two strikers there, and I think it'd be an interesting clash for fight fans. But as far as this one's concerned, Ricky Simon came into this with Ricky Simone, came into this one with a wealth of experience over Oliveira. He's the guy who had been tested in the division. He's the guy who had been the former ranked fighter. He's the guy with the wrestling background, and he was the guy who came in as a 2.5-to-1 favorite. But Vinicius Oliveira, as you said, is huge for this weight class. And as we were just talking about with Pyfer, it's hard to take these guys down when they've got this type of range and physical build, with these grapplers. Now, Simon was very much smaller than him, gave up 3 inches in height and multiple more in reach. He really wasn't able to take the fight to the ground. He was looking to get takedowns throughout the course of this fight, but they were kind of telegraphed, weren't put behind combinations, were kind of shot from the outside. Vinicius Oliveira kind of saw him coming. And then on the feet, Vinicius Oliveira was able to land damaging leg kicks. He throws everything so hard. He's trying to take his opponent's head off with almost every single punch he throws. He's got a very aggressive style, a fan-friendly style. We saw that on the Contender Series when he came in and got that impressive knockout that earned him a contract. But Vinicius Oliveira, like you're saying, is someone that I think is going to be a contender in this division, and he proved it against a guy who's very experienced in Ricky Simone and has legitimate skills.
Yeah, like you said, I love his aggressive attitude. Sometimes his kicks and his strikes sometimes sound like shotguns going off. He definitely conflicts a lot of damage with every single strike that he lands. And I would hate to ever be on the receiving end of one of those kicks that he delivers. But he's definitely going to be a tough matchup for anybody in the division. He's definitely going to be a guy that we need to start talking about in this very, very stacked bantamweight division that we have in the UFC right now.
Yeah, I think so as well.
We had another KO performance. We had Gene Silva getting the KO win against Charles Jourdain. I like Gene Silva coming into this matchup. I thought he was on a nice winning streak. I think he's got potential to, rise up in the rankings as well. What were your thoughts and how impressed were you by Gene Silva's performance in this?
Yeah, I was impressed a little bit with Gene Silva, but there's a little bit of a caveat on this one. Gene Silva did miss weight. Charles Jourdain, was kind of irked by that. When they had the final face-offs, he was not calling him a dirty fighter, but he was telling him, you know what you did. That was kind of classless. You got to show up on weight. And Charles Jourdain, couldn't really get anything going in this one. Couldn't get the fight to the ground. Was eating big punches on the feet. He tried to out-volume him, but he just couldn't stop Gene Silva from getting inside. Gene Silva had no problem eating the punches of Charles Jourdain. The power was not affecting him. And the smaller Gene Silva was able to get into that boxing range and eventually, find a home for some big strikes. But, I was impressed by him, yes, but I think that the weight cut, you got to take a little bit off of, the hype that the win gives him.
Yeah, 100%, and that's basically sanctioned cheating. When that's involved. I think even if he was able to make weight, I think Gene Silva still would have got the victory. But like you said, definitely hampers it a little bit. He's definitely going to have to make weight in his next fight if he wants to continue this trajectory. But Brett, if he continues to make weight, how far of a trajectory and how far do you think he can continue to go up the rankings?
He's good. He's good. You look at him, he's physically he looks like a ball of muscle. This guy is an imposing fighter for this division. When you go and look at his record, he's never been finished. Multiple knockout wins on his record, multiple submission wins on his record. Has never been subbed, never been knocked out. This is a guy who, you saw his emotion after the fight. He wants to be in there. This guy likes to fight. So he's someone he's probably going to turn around on short notice on relative occasion. And I can't wait to see him perform again. I think he's going to be someone to keep an eye on.
Yeah, 100%. And I really, really hope he can get the weight on track. because he's definitely an exciting fighter that I would love to continue to see fighting.
Yep.
We have another fight that honestly I think is in consideration for fight of the night. We had Andre Feely getting the victory over Cave Swanson in what was an absolute brawl. I thought this was a very, very exciting fight. I thought both fighters fought good. Cave Swanson showed his veteran experience and mentality and fought a good fight and kept it close. I do think Andre Feely got the best of him and deserved the win. But what did you think about this fight, Brett?
Yeah, Cub Swanson came into this one and, had a pretty long layoff. He was a guy who's had a tremendous career. He's fought Jose Aldo, was, knocked out in that fight. But, he's fought the best in the UFC Hall of Fame against Doho Choi for one of the greatest fights in UFC history. If you haven't seen it, go back and watch it. Him versus Doho Choi, that was a great fight. This is a guy who's had a great career. It was a good fight. Andre Feely was able to get more done on the feet. Cub Swanson was loading up for big shots. Andre Feely was kind of using the volume and speed and elusiveness that he has. I thought that Andre Feely was a little bit younger in this one. Do I think that he's historically a better fighter than Cub Swanson when you put their careers together? Probably not. But, at this stage in his career, Cub Swanson is 38 years, or I'm sorry, he's 40 years old coming into this one. And, his best days are probably behind him, unfortunately. So I think that Andre Feely picked up an impressive win. Cub Swanson showed that he's a gamer and someone that is never going to be taken out easily. This was a good fight, and both of these guys are legends. And I kind of like when the UFC puts two of these old dogs against one another. It doesn't really feed them to the new, up-and-coming contenders on the block.
Yeah, it was. I think both fighters showed that they could still fight. If the UFC and Cave Swanson wanted to fight in UFC again, I would love to see him get a couple more fights. I think both fighters went out there and proved that they are worthy to get a couple more fights in the UFC. I think Andre Feely, maybe, should get a ranked opponent if he gets another win. Even given his age, he's kind of going maybe on like a late, surge here. And who knows, maybe he may be able to beat a ranked opponent before his career wraps up. But this was definitely a great fight by both fighters. And I was definitely impressed by both Andre Feely and, Cub Swanson, being the fact that he is 40 years old.
Yeah, I was too. I thought it was a good, entertaining fight, and it was a breath of fresh air after some of the fights that we're not going to talk about earlier.
Yeah, and, speaking of the other fights, I know we pretty much summed up all the fights, but was there any other, UFC 303 reactions? The only thing I could think of right now was, Ray Teixeira. His debut against Carlos Hernandez. I don't think Ray was as dominant as I thought he would be. The fight was much closer than I would have liked. I thought Ray, being the fact that he's undefeated, as much of a high favorite as he was, I thought he was going to steamroll through Carlos Hernandez. But the fight was much closer than what was anticipated. And maybe hampers maybe what his ceiling for Ray Teixeira maybe is. But what were your thoughts on that? And was there any other UFC 303 thoughts that you have?
Yeah, I thought Ray is a guy from Japan who is 22 years old. So, Carlos Hernandez is a tough customer, especially in your debut. So, we'll see what he's got going forward. We'll, obviously pump the brakes there a little bit, but I think he's got a good potential to him still. But Andre Arlovsky and Martin Budier, I guess we got to talk about it. Arlovsky looks like it's the last time that he's ever going to fight in his career. This one was not a good fight. If you go back and watch Derek Lewis and Francis Ngannou and some of the worst fights that we've ever seen, maybe it wasn't quite that, but this didn't get anybody out of their seats. It was a lot of two guys that looked out of shape hugging against the side of the cage. And, I wish that Andre Arlovsky didn't go out that way, because in his prime, he'd have dusted through a guy like Martin Budier. He never showed up once in his career in the type of shape that Martin Budier showed in this last weekend. And some of these guys like Budier, like Collier, like Parker Porter, like Romanov, these guys got to get their weight under control, because I don't know how they're fighting guys like Andre Arlovsky, who's damn near 45 years old. And they're getting into these competitive matchups with him. It's like, guys, he was once a title contender. You got to look at this guy's body's in better shape than you, and he's 15 years older. So it's really frustrating at times to see some of these guys outside the top 15 in the heavyweight division beat up on old Andre, who was once champion and what was once a great fighter. So it was kind of hard to watch that.
Yeah, definitely. For a guy with his resume, Andre Arlovski, a former champion, maybe potential UFC Hall of Fame. For Martin Buday, for a guy that has a decent record, I think he's 15-2, I believe, right now. It's not a great 15-2. And if you asked me before blindly what was his record, I definitely wouldn't have said it was 15-2. So it's definitely interesting to see what he's going to do because, he's barely getting by in these fights. He is winning, but it's not exciting, and he's not really dominating. So it's going to be interesting to see who he goes next. But he's definitely going to continue to be put on these early prelims because, no UFC is going to, fans going to want to watch that on the main card or even the regular prelims for that matter. But the last thing I want to shout out on this main card from the UFC 303 was we had Macy Shazin getting the, doctor stoppage over Maria Bueno Silva. What were your thoughts from that fight, Brett?
Yeah, I mean, we got to give a shout out to the women here because they actually put on a really entertaining fight in this one. That first round was wild. Mayra Bueno Silva came right after trying to take her head off. Macy chased on, trying to dictate range with that jab and leg kicks, and then got the fight to the ground. And everybody coming into this one was saying that Mayra Bueno Silva was going to be the one that might have the grappling advantage. And Macy chased on, kind of ran right through her into full mount, landed an elbow that stopped this fight that was absolutely horrendous. A huge gash above the eyebrow for Mayra Bueno Silva. Now, she was contesting the stoppage here. She thought it shouldn't have been stopped, but you could see veins. You could almost see it all in this cut. And it was only going to get worse because a girl like Macy Chiasson is smart. She's long, and she probably would have used a jab to target that eye the rest of the fight and make it even worse than what it was. And we obviously don't want long-term damage for people. But this was a very entertaining fight for as long as it lasted. And my hat's off to the ladies in this one for keeping us entertained.
Yeah, 100%. I think they had a lot to do with saving this card. They were definitely one of the more entertaining fights of the night. Definitely a fight that none of us got predicted right. I think we all went with Bueno Silva. But it was a fight that was basically a pick 'em. You could have won with either or. Both ladies are very tremendously skilled. But Macy Shashin was able to go in there and get the win. This is going to be great for her and her career. It's going to be interesting to see what this does for her career. And this is probably going to put her on a high trajectory as well after this performance.
Yeah, especially picking up this win against someone in Mayra Bueno Silva who just competed for the title against Pennington. So, on a short list of contenders for sure.
And, what was supposed to be the main event for UFC 303, the fight that we keep thinking that we're going to get, but it never seems to ever come here. We were expecting to get Michael Chandler against Conor McGregor. At this point, we can only have speculation. Obviously, every time Dana White has a microphone in front of him, obviously one of the first questions they're going to ask is, when's Conor going to be able to fight? Barstool, decided to ask him a question, August, September, October, and Dana White responded with none of the above in regards to McGregor fighting. At this point, it's hard to see if McGregor is even going to be able to get the fight in 2024. This has turned out to be a complete mess. Some people are speculating that Chandler is going to move on and fight somebody else, and that McGregor is just never going to come back and fight at all. Some people are saying they're going to create a whole new pay-per-view just for McGregor, and some people are saying maybe he'll fight at the end of the year in Vegas. But what do you think about where we're at in the McGregor-Chandler fiasco, Brett?
I mean, they kind of got to go back to the end of the line now, and it's disappointing because we all are, hoping for Conor McGregor to come back. He was labeling this the biggest sports comeback, in history. He's a guy who everyone wants to see be at his best, but he hasn't been at his best for a long time. And we've got to kind of look at this situation honestly. He's a guy who's made more money than anyone in the history of this sport. He's somebody who's made $100 million fighting Floyd Mayweather. I know he only got about 50% of that, but he's somebody who sold his whiskey company for multiple hundreds of millions of dollars. This guy does not need money. And when you go back into SBG Ireland and you're facing these killers who fight for $35,000 to $85,000 a fight, and they're trying to take your head off in sparring, these are going to be tough days even leading into the fight. So I don't know if he wants to go through the ringer of what it really takes to compete at the highest level anymore. That's certainly a question that he's going to have to ask himself before he comes back and gets into the cage. But as far as Michael Chandler is concerned, you can sit there and say Conor McGregor's been inactive. Conor McGregor hasn't done this. Michael Chandler, you haven't done anything either. You've been sitting there waiting for Conor McGregor this whole time. You're no more as good as he is at this point, because if you look at it, you haven't made a check in a year and a half. You have not been paid by the company to fight in almost a year and a half. So, and you've been waiting for this guy. So, it's hard for Michael Chandler. I think he probably keeps waiting at this point. It's one of those things where he's going to get paid more than he's ever been paid. And if he loses, he's probably going to retire. And if he wins, he goes and, keeps trying to fight. But, I think as far as booking it by the end of the year, I don't know about that. I think that December would probably be the best situation. I think the Sphere probably already has a main event that hasn't been announced. I think that we're going to get Jones versus Stipe Miocic before the end of the year. And I also think we're probably going to get Max Holloway versus Ilya Topuria. So a lot of these pay-per-views are probably booked up. And Conor McGregor's going to have to wait for a little bit, but he probably wants to wait with whatever injury he's got going on, or whether it was a toe or he was knocked out in sparring. I'm hearing a lot of different stuff from a lot of different people. You never know.
Yeah, I think right now it's definitely going to look like it's more likely than not that we're going to see this in 2025. With Michael Chandler, he basically put all his stock and all his eggs into one basket. You can't blame him. Where he was at in his career, he probably wasn't going to ever, become a serious, title runner or title contender and be able to challenge Islam. So at this point, he was just looking for high money fights. Having that tremendous, exciting win over Tony Ferguson, what better way than to turn that into a Conor McGregor fight? Chandler's an exciting fighter, so who wouldn't want to see him fight against McGregor? But with McGregor, obviously delaying it as time goes on, it's going to be unfortunate if, Chandler puts all his eggs in one basket and, it doesn't pay off. He's a guy that probably would want to at least fight twice a year. So that's 2 paychecks a year that he's been giving up. And, by the time this fight, if it does happen, he's probably sacrificed about 5 or 6 paychecks. But McGregor says that if this fight does go on, it's going to equal 10 of Chandler's fights. So if he does get it, it will pay off. But right now, it's looking like it may not pay off, and how unfortunate that would be for Chandler. But at the end of the day, it's his own fault because it's his own choice for wanting to wait this long for McGregor.
Yeah, I agree. I think at this point, you got to keep waiting.
Yeah, I think that's the only option at this point.
Yeah.
But obviously, that finishes and wraps up our UFC news. But we had a lot of stuff in the PFL. We had Brandon Longname getting the doctor stoppage win over Justin Gonzalez. And, man, what a nasty gash and cut that was. And definitely rightfully so for that to be stopped. But what were your thoughts from this fight, Brett?
I thought that Brendan Loughnane, he's came in here as a 6-1 favorite in both of these fights versus Pedro Carvalho and Justin Gonzalez. But Brendan Loughnane's looked fantastic. Expertly timed knee, busted open Gonzalez. I don't know how Gonzalez ate that shot. It was, as I just said, expertly timed, put right on him as he shot in. Opened a huge gash. That one had to be stopped. Brendan Loughnane kind of funnily very fun quote here stated that he saw his brain when the referee was pulling him back. He's like, I could see his brain. Thank goodness the referee stopped the fight. So, I thought it was a good stoppage. Loughnane's looking really good. This featherweight tournament is shaping up to be, really something. I think Timur Khizriev is the dark horse of this featherweight tournament, stays undefeated after beating Enrique Barzola on this card, and also beat Brett Johns when he was in Chicago. So, Timur Khizriev is someone I've been watching in Bellator for a very long time. He's the youngest competitor in any of these tournaments and has the most confidence. He thinks he's going to run right through it, and I think that his skill set is probably advantageous for the rest of these guys in this playoff.
Yeah, I think this is shaping up to be one of the best, brackets, and PFL playoff series that we've seen in a long time. We're going to have a lot of interesting matchups at, featherweight, and we're also going to have a lot of interesting matchups at welterweight. We had Logan Sterling getting the unanimous decision win over Luca Polite. What were your thoughts from this win by Logan Storley?
Yeah, Logan competes back in his home fans, in front of his home fans at the Sanford Pentagon in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. He's a South Dakota native of Webster, South Dakota, a little bit over an hour and a half from where they fought this fight. So Logan Storley is a guy who's a 4-time All-American in wrestling in Division I at the University of Minnesota. He used that wrestling in this one to a unanimous decision victory. We kind of all saw how this one was going to play out, but. Logan Storley is not this guy who's going to knock your socks off with entertainment. He's not, the most creative fighter in the world, but he has a skill set that, is conducive to winning fights, and he takes these guys down, puts them on their backside, and controls them there. That's exactly what he did in this one. Luca Polite was, he's a good fighter, but was a little bit outmatched when it came to the grappling.
Yeah, 100%. I think Logan Storley was definitely outmatched him. And definitely proved that there's levels to this. And right now he's just levels above where Luke is. And I was very impressed by Sterling, and I'm interested to see what he does in the tournament.
Yeah, and he actually got eliminated from this one because of that knockout loss to Shamil Musayev. It'll be Musayev, Muradov, Umlatov, and Don Madge in the tournament there. It's kind of weird. Don Madge gets loses to Neiman Gracie on this card, but after that win over Brendan Ward, will also get into the tournament because of it being in the first round and him getting those 6 points. So it's going to be Shamil versus Ramazanov. It'll be a rematch. Shamil just knocked out Ramazanov on this card. Shamil also knocked out Logan Storley in Chicago. He's my dark horse to win this one. So he's undefeated in this one. We're going to have Magomed Umlatov, who just beat Brendan Ward and forced Ward, didn't force him to retire, but Ward subsequently retired after the contest. You're going to have Umlatov, you're going to have Madge, and then you're going to have those two Russian fighters fight again. So it's going to be entertaining at the welterweight playoffs as well. I think the PFL is, really, liked the Bellator guys that have came over and given looks to the PFL competitors. And also there's a lot of Bellator guys in the brackets for these tournaments. So I thought that the purchase of the company has really played out well for them.
Yeah, 100%. I think right now this is the strongest the PFL pool has ever been. And like you said, it's so strong that even a fighter like a Logan Storley, who was widely regarded as one of the better fighters in the PFL, is what was eliminated as well. And this goes to speak to the talent that is in the PFL right now. Mm-hmm. But obviously, we have one boxing news. We have Teofimo Lopez retaining his belt, defeating Steve Claggart by unanimous decision. We know Teofimo Lopez is one of the best boxers in the world, but he keeps fighting guys that we know that he's just levels above. And, I'm just interested to see, how many more fights it's going to take before we see Lopez fight one of these top guys like a Tank Davis or like a, Devin Haney, and really, really test his skills. We know he beat Lomachenko, but it seems like ever since then he hasn't been fighting the top guys in the world.
Yeah, after that loss to Kambosos, when he lost his belt, he kind of really hasn't been the same. But, I got to be full transparency here. I didn't get a chance to watch this one. We were watching a lot of UFC and PFL this weekend, and this one, this one and the Estrada fight both slept under my radar here. So, I'm glad Teofimo Lopez retained his title. It looked like he won this fight by decision, wasn't able to get the guy out of there. But he's a guy who, has a big name. He's going to be able to sell a pay-per-view if he goes against a Garcia or a Raleigh Romero or, a Pitbull Cruz or a Tank or whoever he wants to fight at this division, or the division above him. But, Teofimo Lopez, I'm glad he got the victory, and we'll see him fight next time.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see. We got a lot of, potential matchups for him. Right now, the 135 and the 140 weight class in boxing is definitely by far the superior weight class. So there's a bunch of big names. And I really, really hope we see Lopez fighting one of these big names. And maybe we won't have to watch UFC over it that weekend.
Yeah.
So that pretty much wraps up everything that we have for this week. Obviously, we'll have episode 3 next week. Same time. It will be, Wednesday night. So make sure you tune in for episode 3. We got a lot of stuff to break down. We got the whole Jorge Masvidal fight this weekend. So that's going to be interesting. We're obviously going to preview the UFC fight night this week. We also hope that you guys all enjoy your 4th of July weekend. Make sure to follow us on all social media at Punch ETB. Follow the Empty the Bench Podcast Network on Facebook, X, Instagram, and TikTok at ETB Network. Follow our YouTube channel at youtube.com/ETB Network for our shows and other ETB Network shows. And if you can't watch us, then take us on the go and listen to us in your AirPods.
Yep, thanks for joining us, fight fans. We'll be back next week. If you want to catch us on socials, that's Punch ETB from Brett Cagle and Anthony Balester. We'll catch you guys next time.
See ya.
See ya.